You are listening to the ERP, Organizational Change Journal, a podcast brought to you by Nestell and Associates.
What about learning and development? For me, that's something that takes a fair amount of foresight in planning, and that needs to begin well before you start your actual implementation. But what about learning and development in the organization? To what extent do you suggest and encourage opportunities for training and learning, both before implementation, during, and post?
So I've got a slightly different view on this to many in the industry. Most software vendors will talk, particularly in the selection piece and in the sales component, about training and the learning and development. They'll talk about the train-the-trainer model that they use and all those sorts of things. There's a couple of things around that. Firstly, I think the train-the-trainer model is flawed. Fundamentally, I do believe in building capability within an organization. So for all of my ERP implementation projects, even back in the selection piece, I again plant these seeds that the organization knows that this is the outcome that we're looking to get. And I think it's one of the most critical areas that impacts the long-term success of an ERP project. And I actually call it knowledge transfer as opposed to learning and development, or training and learning and development. I think it's really important that knowledge gets transferred from the people, from the consultants at the vendor into the project team from the client. So it's important for them, I believe, to build capability. It's really important that they understand the nuances of the configuration settings and the interdependencies. So I talk about them understanding how the system hangs together under the hood, because you've built that capability and they have that understanding and knowledge. They then become self-sufficient. Now, some vendors are short-term thinking, small-minded about that, because they see a revenue source being withdrawn from them because they're not getting support fees and those sorts of things when they need help. But I think the business is far better off in the long term when they've built that capability. And actually, the software vendor, I think, is better off because they then have a completely different discussion with their client. They can start talking about other aspects of the business, the phase 2s and 3s and 4s, and that continual improvement process that goes on within a business, or at least should go on within a business, about leveraging the capability that is inherent in a lot of these systems, but isn't always deployed at the beginning because, let's be frank, you have to be careful how big of an elephant you eat first time up.
Yeah, exactly. And David, this is a topic that you and I know, could discuss for an hour and dig into quite a bit. But I do agree with you. I think that the train-the-trainer model is flawed. I would agree with that. And I think in very, very, very rare cases may that be a way to go. But I think for the most part, it is flawed. I think often it's seen as a way to reduce time and money and effort and cost from a project planning perspective, but I think it's flawed. And there is a field called L&D, obviously, learning and development, which I think, as you do, David, I think of it as effective and learning transfer of knowledge, basically is what it is. And I also think that we in the ERP field, and not just practitioners, but as vendors, we have an awful lot to learn from the L&D folks. And we've had several podcasts, and we will continue to have several podcasts where we invite learning and development professionals to join us and share their insight, because I do think that idea, as you say, of effective knowledge transfer is absolutely critical. And, and there's a way when you look at ERP vendor project plans tactically to see how they address and how important knowledge transfer and learning and development is. So just by looking at the actual project plan, you can see, frankly, what they know or don't know about effective knowledge transfer.
I would agree. And to add to that, I would say that I tell my clients that repetition is the mother of learning. And it's really important for the client's team to have their hands on the keyboards as early as possible. Another saying I say, particularly to the vendors I work with, I said, if the consultant's hands are on the keyboard, there's no learning going on.
Yeah.
Now, the organization is not learning anything unless the client's team have their hands on the keyboard.